അവസാന നിമിഷം വരെ എന്നോട് നിന്റെ മനസ്സ് പറഞ്ഞുണ്ടാവും എനിക്കല്ലേ ഉറപ്പില്ലത്തുള്ളൂ. ബാനർ എന്തായാലും ഞാൻ അയച്ചിരുന്നു. ടീച്ചർ അവരാണ് അടിക്കുന്നത് ബാനറൊക്കെ. അവർക്ക് ഡീറ്റെയിൽസ് കൊടുത്തിട്ട് ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഷെയർ ചെയ്യും. പ്രോഗ്രാം കളർഫുൾ ആയിട്ട് നടക്കും. ഇപ്പൊ മെമന്റോ ആ സാറ് ഫോട്ടോ ഒക്കെ വാങ്ങിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. പിന്നെ അതുപോലെ മെഡലുകൾ അതും റെഡിയാണ്. അത് ഞങ്ങളെ സ്കൂളിൽ തന്നെ പ്രോഗ്രാം സ്പോൺസർ ചെയ്തേക്കുന്നു. അപ്പം നടക്കൂലെന്ന് ഒരിക്കലും പറയാൻ പറ്റില്ല. നിങ്ങളൊരു കാര്യം ചെയ്യേ, നിങ്ങളുടെ പ്രിൻസിപ്പളെ മാനേജറൊന്ന് വിളിച്ച് തെറ്റാണ്. കാരണം ചെയർ വിളിക്കാൻ ഞാൻ മോശമാണ്. അതുപോലെ NSSന്റെ ടീച്ചേഴ്സിനും അതുപോലെ SIPന്റെ ടീച്ചറും അവരെ രണ്ടാളും വിളിച്ചേക്കും. അയ്യോ അതൊരിക്കലും ജയിച്ചിട്ടില്ലല്ലോ. പിന്നെ പോസ്റ്റർ അങ്ങനെയാണെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നമുക്കൊരു മോട്ടിവേഷൻ ക്ലാസ് കൊടുത്തൂടെ? അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെ നിങ്ങളെ ഫോട്ടോ വെച്ചിട്ട് ചെയ്യാന്നുള്ളതിലാണ്. എന്തായാലും പോസ്റ്ററും കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ ചെയ്യും. നിങ്ങളെന്തായാലും ഇവരായിട്ട് കോണ്ടാക്ട് ചെയ്യും. നിങ്ങളെന്തായാലും ഈ ഒരു ഫംഗ്ഷനിൽ വേണം. പിന്നെ പോസ്റ്ററും കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ ചെയ്യാം. അവര് ഏറ്റെടുത്തിട്ട് ചെയ്യാം. അല്ല അപ്പൊ നിങ്ങക്ക് പറഞ്ഞൂടെ അധ്യക്ഷൻ ഞാനാണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ പോലെ? മെയിൻ അധ്യക്ഷൻ നിങ്ങളാണല്ലോ. നിങ്ങളന്ന് ഇല്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞതുകൊണ്ടാണ് നിങ്ങളെ എടുത്തിടാഞ്ഞ്. സൈലന്റ് മിസ് എന്തായാലും പ്രോഗ്രാമിന് വരില്ല, മിസ് ഉണ്ടാവില്ല. അപ്പൊ നിങ്ങളെന്തായാലും വേണമെന്നാണ് എൻ്റെ ഒരു പ്ലാനിങ്. ഇപ്പൊ ചേർസ്ഥാനം നിങ്ങൾ തന്നെയാണ്. ഇനിയിപ്പോ മോട്ടിവേഷൻ ക്ലാസ് കൊടുക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ അഡീഷണലി നിങ്ങളെ ഫോട്ടോ മെൻഷൻ ചെയ്യും. അല്ല നിങ്ങളെ ഞാനൊരു കോർഡിനേറ്റർ ആയിട്ടല്ല ഈ ഒരു പ്രോഗ്രാമിലേക്ക് വിളിക്കുന്നത്. അറ്റ്ലീസ്റ്റ് നിങ്ങളാണ് ഒഫീഷ്യലി സിഗ്നേച്ചറിന്റെ ചെയർ. ആദരിക്കാന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാല് നിങ്ങളുടെ പേരില് ഒരു മെമ്മന്റോ പോലും സെറ്റാക്കാൻ പറ്റിയിട്ടില്ല. ആകെ 7 മെമ്മന്റോക്ക് മാത്രമാണ് ഞാൻ കൊടുത്തിട്ടുള്ളത്. അപ്പൊ എന്താണ് ചെയറെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അത്രയും വലിയ പൊസിഷനാണ്. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇരിക്കാൻ പറ്റും. പിന്നെ അല്ലാന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഓറിയന്റേഷൻ ക്ലാസ് രണ്ടും നിങ്ങൾ തന്നെ ഡീൽ ചെയ്യേണ്ടി വരും, അധ്യക്ഷനും ഇതും. നിങ്ങളെന്തായാലും ഈ പ്രിൻസിപ്പളും മാനേജറും വിളിച്ച് സംസാരിക്കും. അതുപോലെ SIB ടീച്ചേഴ്സിനെ ഒന്ന് കോണ്ടാക്ട് ചെയ്യും. ഞാനാണ് ചെയർ, എൻ്റെ ഇതിലാണ് പ്രോഗ്രാം ഏൽപ്പിച്ചതായിരുന്നു എന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞ് സംസാരിച്ചു. കുഴപ്പമില്ലല്ലോ, എന്തായാലും നിങ്ങളുടെ പേര് ആ ബാനറിൽ ഉണ്ടാവും. അത് ഞാൻ 100% ഉറപ്പില്ല. ഞാൻ എന്തായാലും ഈ ഒരു മീറ്റില് ഗൂഗിൾ മീറ്റിന്റെ ഓർമ്മയിൽ ഫംഗ്ഷനിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കണം. മോർണിംഗിൽ തന്നെ ഇറങ്ങിക്കും. കാരണം വരത്തിന്റെ ഫംഗ്ഷനും കൂടി പങ്കെടുത്തിട്ട് നമുക്ക് ഉഷാറാക്കാം. പിന്നെ അത് മാത്രല്ല, വിഷ്ണുവിനും ഇവരൊക്കെ കൊണ്ടുവരണമെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾ എന്തായാലും വേണം. ചേർന്ന് വേണമെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഗ്രൂപ്പിലൊന്ന് സംസാരിക്കട്ടെ, ഇൻവൈറ്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് മാക്സിമം പാർട്ടിസിപ്പേഷൻ വേണമെന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് സംസാരിക്കാം. കൂടുതൽ വിവരങ്ങൾ ഞങ്ങൾ അറിയിക്കുമെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് ഒന്ന് സംസാരിച്ചാൽ നന്നായിരിക്കും. കാരണം നിങ്ങളെ അറിയുന്നവർ കുറേ ആൾക്കാരുണ്ടാവും കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട്.
Good evening, everyone. Shakir sir.
Good evening, sir. Good evening. Shall we begin the program? I hope students have joined. Have you all joined today's presenters? Have you joined all?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So let's wait one more minute and start.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Yeah. Good evening. So I'm Abdul Samad, head of the Department of English, PSMO College, TIRURANGADI, and the department is organizing this program in collaboration with Department of English, AMAL College of Advanced Studies, NILAMBUR. We have today we will have 7 presentations. 7 presentations on articles written on the wasteland, and the presenters are from AMAL College, PG students. So as we have mentioned earlier, this program is read 100 articles on the wasteland to mark the centenary celebrations of the publication of the wasteland. So let's start the session, and I would like to invite Dr. Shakir from College Nilambur to moderate the session. Sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Samad sir. Hope I am audible. Yeah. Good evening, all dear faculty members and dear students. Hope I am audible.
Audible, but your voice is cracking a bit.
Is it clear now, or Samad sir, am I audible, or shall I continue?
Yeah, it's okay, but the voice is a bit trouble. What about others? Is it okay for you?
Audible.
Yes, sir, it's audible now.
Carry on, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, all. It's my enormous pleasure that we are able to conduct an academic venture like this, reading 100 articles on wasteland to mark the 100 years of the publication of wasteland in collaboration with the Department of English, PSMO College. As we know that wasteland is one of the path-breaking poems ever written in the history of English literature. It's considered, it was originally written in the year 1921 and in the journals Criterion, Dial, and later it has been published into a book form in the year 1922. Regarding the structure, theme, stylistic features, the poem is considered as an iconic text in English literature. It reflects, the poem Wasteland reflects the mood of the age in which it has been written. It makes a deeper reflection of the socio-political and cultural milieu in which the poem was written. In this sense, we know that Wasteland is really one of the important works ever written in the world literature itself, in the history of world literature itself. And this publication of Wasteland is considered as the apotheosis of high modernism in English literature. And with the publication of Wasteland, Eliot himself has positioned him, he has been establishing himself as an apostle of modern literature, modernism in English poetry, in English literature. So this is really considered as a very important milestone moment. 100 years of the publication of Wasteland is considered as a milestone moment in the history of English literature. And we, together, the Department of English, PSMO College, with the Department of English, AMAL College, we have been deciding to celebrate this milestone event, the publication of the centenary year of the publication of Wasteland, by conducting a program like this together in collaboration with. Actually, this is really something a very relevant program. I think it's going to it's a very relevant program. We were really thinking of conducting a program like this. The original idea of conducting a program like this has been conceived by the Department of English, PSMO College. We know that so many papers were written on Wasteland, so many articles, studies, theses have already been written on Wasteland around the world. And our students were really made selecting 100 relevant articles, and they were really made reading 100 articles on Wasteland. By conducting a program like this, actually, our students are getting an experience of reading articles on reading a research article. They get an idea of how to write a research article, how to formulate an argument or a viewpoint on a literary text, on the basis of a literary. This is really what we are really providing. So from this point of view, we know that this is going to be a highly beneficial program for our students, and we are very happy that we are able to conduct a program like this in collaboration with the Department of English, PSMO College. I would like to congratulate the whole team there in PSMO College for taking the initiative to conduct a program like this, and I would like to thank once again the team, the faculty members of the Department of English under the leadership of Samad sir for making us collaborating with this joint venture. Let's move on to the paper presentations. And today's paper presenters are from our college. They are the second year MS students of AMAL College. LIMIYA, FATHIMA, SAHLA, JAHANA, JULNA, HIBA, SHERIN, PRIYA, and FABHANA are going to present papers today. I hope all of them have joined here. LIMIYA, may I invite LIMIYA? LIMIYA, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's move on to the paper presentation, and I would like to invite LIMIYA to make the first presentation. LIMIYA, you may please.
Okay, thank you, sir. I hope it's visible. Am I right?
Yes.
Visible, yeah.
Okay.
Visible. Carry on.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I am LIMIYA, second year PG student of AMAL College of Advanced Studies. So today, on this auspicious occasion of celebrating 100 years of Wasteland, I will be discussing the article Modern Art Technique in the Wasteland by Jacob Korg. So without any further ado, let's get started. The Wasteland is securely established as one of the most significant poems of the 20th century. It is also remembered to be, by any standard, an extremely eccentric work. These eccentricities are the result of various influences on Eliot, as well as the spirit of the feature of art of the early 20th century. However, these sorts of explanation do not do justice to this creative genius. The anomalous construction of the Wasteland has led critics to compare with other arts such as music, where the poem has been even compared to Beethoven's symphony and other musical forms. The sensibility displayed by the wasteland's stylistic innovations resembles the animated technical experiments of the Cubist, Futuristic, Dadaist, and Surrealists, whose founders were Eliot's contemporaries in the graphic arts. Each of these movements has its own literary aspects. However, the most successful experiments of these movements resembled that of the wasteland. The wasteland is generally described as a collection of fragments. The 5 sections into which it is divided do not claim to be complete in themselves. Each of these contains passages which stack upon each other without transitions, and within these appear even smaller units, sometimes single words or phrases that are incomplete in form and apparently unrelated to their context. However, critics such as Edmund Wilson, Cleant Brooks have shown that every part of the poem are related to each other by the means of a complicated system of echoes, contrasts, parallels, and allusions. Though the stories are incomplete in the context of the poem, they form a completion larger than themselves. This is like an effect of an energetic shattering of the subject matter. All the shattered pieces are rearranged in a different order. As a result, this effect can strike anyone belonging to the Cubist, Futurist, Dadaist, or Surrealist movement. A cubist, in order to see their models as a whole and to transcend the conventional limitation of perception, dissected their subjects by cutting them into parts and reassembling them within the pictures in a new pattern, just like a biologist dissecting a frog and laying its organs on his tray. As we examine a cubist painting, we find that there is no one place where a figure is drawn fully. Instead of limiting himself to one angle of vision, the cubist painter circles around his model, showing the same guitar or bottle of sherry from many different aspects, placing all these shapes side by side on the same surface and ordering them into a single design. A futurist has somewhat different principles from a cubist, but still the results are very close to them. They sought to convey principles, powerful emotions, usually tensions or anguish, by analyzing the models into suitable design element. They also used the device of depicting successive states of model as though they were simultaneous, so that a futurist painting like a cubist one repeats forms rhythmically in its design. So the fragments of the model in a cubist or the futurist picture do not merely add up to the original. Instead, they combine in a new way to form the design of the picture, just as the fragmentary scenes, figures, and allusions of the wasteland, which manifest among themselves that relate to the central meaning of the poem. And definitions of surrealism and surrealist manifestos has come and gone. When we say a work has surrealistic quality in it, it is when it is dreamlike and sharply realistic, eerie and funny, unaccountable yet important. Its effect is like an image remembered from a dream. In the poem, The Wasteland, we get new frontiers of feelings by the use of enigmatic images. Surrealism stood for the unleashing of repressed psychic energies and the destruction of established moral values. Hence, this poem is in some ways an unmistakably surrealistic poem. The fragmentation and reintegration observable in The Wasteland can be regarded as the same process as that used by the Cubists and Futurists, that spring from a similar intention, having a comparable effect. Using its theme of the decline and renewal of the faith as its center of relevance, it successfully combines fragments from the myth of Tiresias, the Grail legend, the theories of Fraser and Weston, the Upanishads, and many other sources, both fictional and historical. It creates a sense of circling about the model for seeing different points of views, which the Cubists call analytic cubism. In the Cubist painting, the laws of space are suppressed so that all parts of the model, even those that are normally out of sight, can be brought actively into design. Similarly, in The Wasteland, the laws of time are suppressed so that all that of literature and history can be made available in the poem. Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque were the first to use collage as a method for creating innovative art. They came up with the name collage from the French verb coller, which means to glue or to stick. A device parallel to the technique of collage can be seen in The Wasteland. Here, the real element of the imagined element can be made to support each other. Therefore, the Wasteland style exhibits a responsiveness to the experimentalist mood of the avant-garde paintings of this time. Eliot and the painters of this time may say different things about the spiritual problems of this time, but they speak the same language, an idiom coined from the scientific and philosophical contribution of the early 20th century. Thank you.
Thank you, LIMIYA. LIMIYA has been reading an article on Wasteland, Modern Art Techniques in Wasteland, written by Jacob Cork, and we had a similar paper yesterday by one of the students from PSMO College, how Eliot has been influenced by the modern art techniques and how it gets reflected in the poem Wasteland. And let's have a discussion on this presentation later. And as we have done yesterday, let's first complete all the presentations, and later let's have a discussion on each presentation. And comments are also expected from the part of participants on these presentations. So thank you very much, LIMIYA, and may I invite the next presenter, FATHIMA SAHLA. FATHIMA, you may please
Yes, sir.
present your. Okay.
I hope it is visible.
Visible, FATHIMA.
So, good evening, everyone. Yeah. So, good evening, everyone. My name is FATHIMA SAHLA. Am I audible?
Audible, FATHIMA.
Yes. So, let's get started. My name is FATHIMA SAHLA, all the way from AMAL College of Advanced Studies. As here we are celebrating 100 years of T.S. Eliot's magnum opus, The Wasteland. I would like to navigate your attention to the articles, to some of my key observations from the article, The Tarot Fortune in the Wasteland by Betsy B. Creekmore. So let's get started. Here, I'll be drawing your attention to certain critical blind spots regarding the knowledge of tarot cards and T.S. Eliot. Moreover, the gist of the stanza would also be discussed with due relevance, as well as the significance of Madame Sosostris would also be dealt, and the figures in the tarot cards, followed by a conclusion. Now, let's move on to the critical blind spots in T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, particularly the tarot cards and all. Here, there exist a lot of biographical uncertainties about T.S. Eliot's knowledge. Yes, sir.
May I interrupt? Please
Yes.
turn on that slideshow mode, please. Slideshow mode, so that it will be visible, more clear.
Yes. All right. Slideshow, right?
Function key 5, F5.
What about now?
No, Sahla, it is still in the same mode. Please switch on that, turn on that slideshow mode, so that it will be bigger in size, it will be more clear and visible.
Which is the key? F5, what?
Sahla, it's below.
From the beginning. Sahla, click from big.
You're there actually. Click that from the beginning. Yeah, the first icon from the beginning. You're already there, I think. In that window and from the beginning, and that particular first icon. If you click that, it will be okay. There at the top of that window.
Stella, below this, you can see 3 keys there.
Yeah.
The end. The third one. It might be the third one.
I think yes.
A window. Moving.
Sahla, the window has been closed. In my place. Yeah.
Still, it is the same.
Yeah, same, but just below that home icon, yeah, the home, you can see that from beginning, from current slide. Click that. Either from beginning or current slide.
Stella, near to that zoom option, you can see 3 icons.
Yeah, I saw. Then what? All right, then I would connect it from my phone.
Sir, I think let her have it the convenient way.
No issue, Sahla. You please carry on. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So what is the matter? Like, is it not visible enough or?
We can see your entire window.
It's visible now.
We see the entire window. We want only the presentation.
Oh, okay.
So
fine,
click
yes.
on slideshow from the beginning.
All right. Yeah.
Sahla, you please continue presentation in the present mode. No need of that slideshow. You please carry on. And sorry for the interruption.
Yes, yes. All right, sir. So certain critical blind spots do exist in T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. Am I audible, sir?
Audible, but your slide is not visible.
I switched it off. Please switch it on. Should I switch it on?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Okay, you continue your presentation.
All right. In the yeah. Then you could also see that Robert Curie, expanding and improving upon theories advanced by Gertrude Mauchly, he has demonstrated that Eliot's knowledge of the tarot was derived from a manual published by Arthur Edward Waite in 1910. Here, let's analyze the gist of the stanza. As you all are familiar, Madame Sosostris and the tarot cards comes at the first section, that is the burial of the dead, right? So here we could also see that the wasteland present Madame Sosostris as the tarot card reading psychic who bears bad news, while this stanza has been interpreted in a myriad of ways. 2 important features are commonly regarded as the Eliot's indent. The first one is the clairvoyant is considered as the wisest woman in Europe, because the world is a tattered wasteland where everyone is in search for answers. As such, a fortune teller provides false security with her seemingly absolute understanding of destiny, and everyone as such is desperate enough to believe her. Moreover, Eliot regards fortune telling as a more than empty consolation for the desperate. He writes with levity to poke fun at the concept. I believe these 2 points comprise the general gist of the stanza, but the elusive way in which he elucidates this is what makes The Wasteland a remarkable poem. Like the rest of the poem, this stanza is a hailstorm of allusions and references from various literary sources, often playing with the words from their sources. Moving on to Madame Sosostris. For example, Eliot derives the very name Sosostris, a woman who plays a fortune-telling gypsy at a fair in Aldous Huxley's novel Chrome Yellow. Moreover, while the Norton anthology simply states that Sesostris was a 12th dynasty Egyptian king, and Sesostris was also the name used by Herodotus in tales about a 19th dynasty pharaoh. So these all are some of the key findings of the word, of the name as such, Madame Sesostris. Then let's analyze the following figures. The wasteland where Madame Sesostris reads her cards, we find that they carry the following figures. The first one is the drowned Phoenician sailor, Belladonna, the lady of the rocks, the lady of situations, the man with 3 staves, the wheel, the one-eyed, the blank card, the hanged man, the prophecy where the fear death by water, and crowds of people walking round in a ring. Also plays pivotal role. Now, the speaker of the stanza is a soldier wife who, out of the desperation of her circumstances, has come to the fortune teller to discover what may have happened to her husband in the war. Here, we could see that Madame Sesostris, logically, she deduces that he has died, and she gives this in the form of an elaborately constructed predictions from a pack of tarot cards. Madame Sesostris, famous clairvoyant, the pseudo-Egyptian name Sesostris is relevant because it is a knockoff of a woman in a fictional novel who pretended to be a fortune teller. In other words, the name is a knockoff of an untrue woman who used the name to feign legitimacy. In this way, Eliot brings the stanza by introducing Madame Sesostris as a pretender who is famous via her profound ability to copy the appearances of a cliched fortune teller. Here, the absurdity of Sesostris and her position is further emphasized with the intentional misspelling of the word a clairvoyant. It is also not that the wisest woman in Europe is this lady. This is a slight to war-torn Europe and fortune tellers alike, because it indicates that the country is so lost and dumbfounded that it has stopped to the level of regarding a lowly fortune teller as the wisest of that particular land. And with this wicked pack of cards here said, she then describes the pack of tarot cards can mean 2 things. The first one is a wicked. It is wicked because they are outside of religion. The decay of religion could also be observed from here. Moreover, it is wicked because she inevitably predicts death, so-called death. Now, allusion to Shakespeare's Tempest, when a girl sings of a man who has been dead so long, and everything is given with due relevance. And we could also see that it becomes obvious that Madame's deck is pointedly wicked because it includes false cards that indicate certain death. Then I believe that both of these points seem to describe Madame Sesostris accurately because the lady of situations, this description is comically vague as such. Here, Eliot uses unclear language to show the predictions can be accurate regardless of the outcome. Situations are bound to happen. Here we will also see that the man with 3 staves, and here the wheel, the man with the 3 staves card is properly referred to as the 3 of Wands. Not only does Madame describe this card with this improper language of novice, she completely fails to address the fortune the card is meant to signify. And despite the Eliot's commentary, the wheel is not a card in any tarot deck. We could also see that she refers to a card as the one-eyed merchant. Here, it is relevant because it is further emphasizes her unfamiliarity of her Americanized perspective on European tarot reading, which is blank, something he carries on his back, which I am forbidden to see. There are no blank cards within the tarot decks, and this is an additional instance which Madame Sesostris' wicked cards present another morbid trick. We could also see that here the elusive style put forth by T.S. Eliot, it provides a depth of meaning that adds to the message while simultaneously paying tribute to the authors before him. When research of his allusions bring few results that seem relevant to the context of the poem, one can assume that Eliot is using his language while making some arbitrary connection with his mind as such. This connection it gains a significance by its mere inclusion in the poem, and we could definitely claim that The Wasteland is thus a groundbreaking work. With this, I am winding up my topic for tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sahla. She has been reading the paper titled as The Tarot Fortune in Wasteland, authored by Betsy B. Greekmore. She has been speaking of the significance of fortune telling through the character Madame Sosostris in Wasteland, and through that, Eliot has been trying to present the apocalyptic condition after the Second World War. And thank you, Sahla. And may I invite let's move on to the next presentation. That's by Jahana. May I invite Jahana? Jahana, you may please present your paper.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. I hope I'm audible. Sir, am I audible?
Audible, Jahana. Please go ahead.
So, good evening, everyone. As we are celebrating the 100th year of Wasteland, I'm inviting everyone's attention to my topic, that's Hope and Fear, Tension in the Wasteland by Mikhail Holt. So, it must sound incredibly presumptuous to argue for a major re-evaluation of the wasteland, to argue that the poem's central tension has yet to be defined and that some of the most important clues to its meaning have been ignored or misinterpreted. But criticism of the poem has regularly been divided on the question of whether the poem is a positive indication of Eliot's movement towards Christianity or a cry of despair and frustration. But between these extremes is a great body of criticism dealing primarily with the poem's mythical structure and with the speaker as the mythic hero. Among these critics, there is careful examination of structural details like influence of the Grey legends and the importance of Tiresias are some of the recurrent issues. But the speaker's obvious instability, his violent shift of emotions are hardly noted at all. And its worse, such critics tend to treat the poem as an interesting idea, a thesis, but suited for sociological and anthropological interpretation. But the poem was much more to Eliot than a mythic puzzle to be catalogued or dissected. The poem then reveals itself as part of the speaker's resistance. The energy that informed the poem's structure that carries the speaker forward to his transformation is an emotional dialect of hope and fear, which is the inevitable response to the paradox of conversion. The controversy surrounding the identity or the non-identity of the speaker is explained by the paradox. Eliot's original title for the whole poem is He Do the Police in Different Voices, indicates an evasive central figure who is delivering cryptic clues to his identity through the characters he mimics. And though the poem's title was changed, the function of mimicry still seems to be in place as a convenient vehicle for the speaker whose instability inheres in the fact that there are truths which he is compelled to affirm, but is most terrified to affirming. For example, Madame Sosostris' warning to fear death by water, while it appears to be directed to the speaker from another distinct character, is in fact his own admission of his need of that spiritual loss of self in baptism, the most serious threat to his present mode of being. The basic movement of Wasteland involves both a tormented exposure and then a paring away of that which is malignant in the speaker's character. And we have remaining a character in whom, at least according to the poet's original intention, the issue was to be clearly defined and who was determined to confront his greatest fears by taking the self-sacrificing step towards regeneration. For while the speaker is himself controlled and dominated by his fears, as evidenced by his evasive demonic babbling in the first three parts, the fire sermon actually concludes in a moment of agonized repentance and a cry for help, wherein the essential personality, the voice behind the voices, is revealed and the stage is set for his moving beyond the stagnation of the wasteland. But that moment is difficult to discern without the bold clues provided by the manuscript version of part 4 and 5, clues that have gone unrecognized for the decades since Valeria Elliott published the original drafts of the poem. Unfortunately, the critics are unanimously in their lack of enthusiasm for the long original of The Death by Water. For while the poetry is decidedly bad, in need of vigorous revision or at least condensation, Eliot was attempting something very important, which, when removed completely, leaves a great gap in our understanding of the cataclysmic changes taking place within the poet at the time of composition. The letters between Pound and Eliot suggest that Eliot wanted to keep the original passage of Death by Water, but Pound was adamantly opposed. So these are the edited parts of Death by Water. And to all these things, Eliot, there is too much of what Eliot called personality. Emotion is forced rather than evoked. But while Eliot's method here is objectionable, we must still attempt to understand the basic emotional and spiritual thrust behind it. Paradoxically, suicidal struggle of the speaker towards regeneration and meaning. The importance of the original Death by Water passage is substantiated even more by an examination of later works which employs the same kinds of images and stability of tone, as well as themes of the self-sacrificing quest. Moving to the further stanzas, the movement towards the unfamiliar polar environment provided Eliot with a way of emphasizing the strangeness of conversion. So, antithetical to normal human experience in terms of an environment that is alien and frightening, yet at the same time shockingly beautiful, is an austerity and pure. The various impulse of that hostile environment has been all but ignored critically. The emotional effect of the last three quoted lines, heightened by the repeated pauses indicated by the commas, is that of intense but unsuccessful effort. The action reminds one of the deliberate effort of a man walking a mental tightrope, attempting to assure himself of something what he knows is not true. So, these lines bears presumably polar seems to be prefigure the image of the three white leopards in part 2 of Ash Wednesday, especially when considered along with the frightening vision of the three white-haired women. But a difference in tone of these two poems indicates a revealing difference of attitude on the part of their respective speakers. In the case of Ash Wednesday, the speaker accepts and even seems to welcome the office of the leopards. The mood is one of tranquility. But in Death by Water, the speaker responds to the vision with utter terror. The speaker attempts a violent mental escape into a familiar and uncomfortable setting, but even as he does so, the repressed image of the splintering iceberg re-emerges as cracked ice, wedging its way into the periphery of his consciousness as a symbol of his inevitable death by water, and he utters his last word. The wish here in a handful of dust, promised at the beginning of the poem and running as an undercurrent throughout, is revealed in this excised pace with unprecedented clarity. Moving on to Fleabag. Fleabag, in the section that survived excisions, ends with a similar request. Consider Fleabag, who was once handsome and tall as you. The emotion score of the published eulogy was intended to be at the finality of the death aspects of conversion. Eliot's own reference to what the thunder said suggests an experience that was clearly extraordinary. And it is curious that critics, even those who quoted Eliot's reference to the composition of Part 5, have managed to see in it a good deal less than Eliot's intimates to be there, excising on the level is the spiritual drama of approaching regeneration variously, symbolized by the Grail Knight's approach to the chapel perilous, the dilemma of the between the crucifixion and the resurrection, and the approach of the drought-breaking storm. But on a more innovative and profound level, the part 5 functions as a literary meditation that has the potential to convey us into a realm of experience beyond art. In this context, the poem emerges as an ironic symbol of self, or specifically of the speaker's fearful evasion of the direct experience it can merely describe. For any actual resolution must take place beyond, and in that sense involves a reunionization of the poem itself. Death by water narrative and part 5 narrative would be seen more clearly as the continuation of part 4. Eliot's introductory note to the whole of part 5 points out to the allusion to Christ's appearance to the disciples on the road of Emmaus. Similar to the speaker's terror at his vision of the 3 white-haired women in his disturbed tone as he sees the hooded form appeared and disappeared on all sides, echoing a line, a white line, a long white line that gradually reveals itself to be inescapable. The prison and key passages occurring just prior to the conclusion of the poem sums up the problem solutions dialect, the recognition of which is essential to the speaker's enlightenment, a kind of breakthrough by antithesis. The prison and key symbol is presented in conjunction with the symbol of Coriolanus, whom Eliot employed as a paradigm of destructive pride and the refusal to recognize an external authority, divine or civil. Thus, the key symbolically announces a movement beyond self, a recognition of self-destructiveness of failing. The concluding line of the stanza in which the thunder speaks for the last time shocks the speaker in the midst of the turmoil with the composite image, giving, sympathizing and controlling of a life of wisdom, an image that stands clear contradiction to his own present state of existence, which follow is sudden absolute relief. That is Shanti, Shanti and Shanti. Such an ending is meant to communicate breakthrough and resolution. Onomatopoeically, the Shanti, especially as it appears in repetition, reproduces the sound of steadily falling rain. It is curious that the critics has not made a point of this device before, particularly since the onomatopoeia of the various sounds of thunder is one of the first things the reader notices about the poem. The storm leaves the reader in limbo earlier in part 5 with a bringing rain, a damn gust. Such a line by itself awkwardly uncharacteristic slip on Eliot's part if he intended a conclusion of frustration and unfulfillment. Perhaps the reason for so many critics failing to recognize the unrecognized clues of the poem's real issue has been an unfortunate reluctance to question Pound's influence upon the wasteland. Critics are understandably impressed and intimidated by Pound's defense and confidence in shaping the poem and by his vigorous denunciation of certain passages. A vigor largely due to the fact that Pound's unsympathetic, even caustic attitude towards Eliot's religious interests were adamant, while Eliot's movement in a religious direction was predictably unstable and confused, resulting in a poem that was too influenced by a critic who did not know what it was about. We might see The Wasteland then as a poem still under construction, reflecting a poet who was himself under construction and who, because of the relative instability of his condition, was unable to shape the poem as he and he alone knew it should be shaped. At any rate, a reasonable critical rule of thumb is that the best critical approach to a work of art is that which most fully accounts for the artifact's being as it is. And by such a standard, critical efforts to date have failed to account for The Wasteland, to explain its complexities and identity and identify its real tension. Thank you.
Thank you, Jahana. Jahana has been reading a paper titled as Hope and Fear, Tension in Wasteland by Michael Holt. And she concluded her presentation with this idea. The poem is still under construction, and that marks the relative instability of the poem. And with that, she has been concluding her presentation. And let me invite the next presenter, that is Julna. Julna, you may please join.
Am I audible?
Audible, Julna. Audible.
I'll be sharing the screen. Yeah, can you see this? Can you see the screen? Hello?
Yeah, we can see that, the making of phase 1, yeah.
Okay, I'll begin. Hello, good evening all. I'm JULNA, second MA English, AMAL College of Advanced Studies. On behalf of Reading the 100 articles on wasteland, I'm presenting a paper by Grover Smith titled The Making of Wasteland. So the articles begin with Grover quoting C.S. Eliot complimenting about Ezra Pound, to whom he has dedicated this poem, The Wasteland, about how the poem taken its final shape through Pound's critical effort. Eliot says that it was in 1922 that I placed before him in Paris the manuscript of a sprawling chaotic poem called The Wasteland, which left his hands reduced to about its half size in form in which it appeared in the print. It indicates the length of the poem when it was composed, and before Pound took over, the history of the poem has evolved a gradual groping process of composition and revision. The poem was in manuscript, indeed, but was barely a manuscript, being an aggregation of drafts representing still the diverse stages of a formal intention, though already unified in plan and subjectivity. Donald Gallup, who is a Yale literary bibliographer who published the bibliographies of T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound, has pointed out that Eliot thought of it rather as series of poems than as one poem, not only at the outset, but at the very publication stage. And in the formal respect, the growth of the poem, The Wasteland, resembles that of the Hollow Man and the Ash Wednesday. And the purpose of the aesthetic judgment, the question of one poem versus a series of poems entails little more than a scholastic quibble, but the real point is that Eliot was, with those actual features of the process with which the legend was inconsistent, and the very memory of the writing of the poem had become an embarrassment to him. The poem remained unfinished until he himself tidied it up that it was found who determined the published text was a false one, though in the issue was not gravely so. From Pound's and Eliot's Wasteland correspondence, which with Smith called TWLC following Valerie Eliot's example, this having become available in DD pages, the letters by Ezra Pound, it was clear that Eliot, with however much difference, exercised full control over the text, and from Valerie Eliot, the Wasteland and a facsimile and transcript of the original draft, it has transpired that at the earlier stages also he followed Pound's recommendation, usually but not invariably. Smith arouses the question about the title of the poem that when did this poem called Wasteland actually get its title? He says that perhaps not before the penultimate stage of its composition, after Pound blue penciled the big manuscript and Eliot took it home to London. Otherwise, the previous title, He Do the Police in Different Voices, would have been cancelled and the new title subtitled on the manuscript. And moving on, the draft of the Wasteland published by, the draft of the Wasteland published by Valerie Eliot fall into several categories of material. There are drafts of part 1 to 5 of published poem, including passages discarded from these. There are early short poems and scripts not written from incorporation into the main poem and never published by Eliot, but excavated for lines. There are 3 detached poems which Eliot thought of working into the main poem or printing as an appendix to it. 2 of these could be identified from the correspondence as Song, already published in spring of 1921 as Song to the Ophidian and Ex-Queen. The later called found the Sovegna because of a quotation from Dante in its closing lines. Ex-Queen seemed to have stood third in order among them because Gallup and Valerie Eliot are of the opinion that other separate poems were dirge or elegy because Smith points out to the different candidate at the risk of perversity that elegy and other unplaced draft whose presence in the manuscript is unexplained, except that is tied to dirge, because they were written opposite side of the same sheet. And it is rather a pity that the detached poems in the FATHIMA volume should not have been grouped with the section of the main poems, instead by being thrown in indiscriminately with the scraps and early poems, such as the Death of Saint Narcissus, which never formal part of the larger work. And moving on, Eliot had given the manuscript to John Quinn, who was helped Eliot and found in publishing, assisted in publishing, says that in 1922 appeared to have divided them into 2 groups, one comprising the main part of the poem and the other the scraps and subsidiary poems, and also even some of the first drafts of the main poems. And looking into the reviews when it was given for publication, Smith noted that no doubt many of those who are otherwise attracted to the unfolding history of the wasteland found bibliographical matters boring, but without these, the history cannot be truly written. Some of the reviewers of Valerie Eliot's volume, that a bibliographical work, not indeed an edition, or maybe ignorant rather than bored. And looking into the scholarly reviews, the editor of most respected journals specializing in American literature, who have most helped to keep up the sale of Eliot's work in America, was unable, despite several attempts, to get a review copy of the book. And moving on to the published examination of the published manuscript, the facsimile begin with a title page carrying a quotation from Joseph Conrad. Chronologically, a title page rarely coming to being ahead of the poetic manuscript to which it pertains. Certainly, it is all right to put it at the front, and no further justification is wanted. In this case, the title page belongs to a missing sheaf of manuscript of which presumably it is sole survivor. The lost manuscript, or technically, typescript, was the one discussed by Pound and Eliot in the correspondence. It was the same very that as one sent by Eliot to John Quinn on July 19, 1922 for Livewright's use. If so, it became the printer's copy. The copy for the use of the dial was published, probably derived from the typescript provided for Livewright, or else it may have gone direct from Eliot himself, who must have retained at least one copy from which the Criterion text has derived. This text would have not been independently reconstructed from the blue pencil manuscript still in this position when the first number of Criterion was being made up. These lost typescripts, of course, must have fresh title pages with new epigraph from the Satiricon of Petronius, which Eliot subtitled for one from Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Annotating the cancelled heading of part 2 in the cage, afterwards a game of chess, Valerie Eliot says that this referred to the epigraph from Satiricon, perspective of Sybil, who is hanging in the cage. This can be also found in another indication that it mentioned of the story of a comic story of Henry James that is in the cage. But this has no particular relevance to the part second of the poem. But the cage in James's The Cage of a Post Office is a symbol that could have led Eliot to the passage of Petronius. Moving on about the publication or the process which attracted the publishers, that the fact about the technique used, or about some typewriting techniques. Okay, that is, Smith says that Eliot has used three different machines for typewriting. That Valerie Eliot, who is the second wife of Eliot, remarks that part 4, Death by Water, was typed with the violet ribbon used by Pound, and the Pound's typewriter Smith calls as the typewriter C. So part 5, what the Thunder said, was also typed in violet ink, came from the machine. And the two other machines, typewriter A and B, seem to have belonged to Eliot and his wife Vivian, who is his first wife. Printer A or typewriter A was used for part 1 and 2 of the poem, and part 2 having also a carbon for the death of the Duchess and for the song The Other Poems uh, by Eliot, which was once part of Wasteland. Typewriter B was used for part 3 with its carbon for XP and for the title page. There are obvious and measurable differences between the typefaces registered by the typewriters A, E, and C. And Smith points out that the difference of the sizes, that most importantly, the C printer or the typewriter C had larger sizes, and A and B had smaller sizes. But also he points out that there is no knowledge about the three typewriters were any value and interest in understanding the periods and places and sequences and the various parts of the poem written, but it stays as a mystery. So there is knowledge about these typewriters and things, but it doesn't provide any further information about the place and the publication or the period of, rather any informations are provided. And moving on, part 1 to the poems parts about where it was published and or the period and all. Part 1 and 2 of the poem, which became the Wasteland, as the only parts which can be dated from internal evidence alone. Part 5 is known from the external evidence to have been drafted at Lausanne. Lausanne is a place in Switzerland that where Eliot and was under treatment for his nervous disorder. So that time he wrote the poem, and which says that last week of November and middle of the December of 1921 would be the time when part 5 of the poem was written. And as we see, the date of part 3 and 4, as they appeared in long manuscripts, are at best highly conjectural. But part 1 and 2 seem to have substantially continued into being in November or December also, for they contain material unavailable before November. Example is that the Madame Cesori is in the scene so far indebted to Aldous Huxley's Chrome Yellow, published in the month. Okay, so it is there, so the publication can't be, so the poem would have been written in November. All right, and other the about knowledge about the place is that the material found which were unavailable except in Lausanne, that indicate that the poem was written in Switzerland itself. That in the poem there is the snatches of conversations heard. According to Pound, Eliot would have heard this from fellow patients and adapted in passage beginning. Summer surprises us. Moving on, Since the fair copy of the part 1 must have closely preceded the making of the fair copy of the part 2, too closely for Vivian to have seen the poetry in an earlier draft, this must have taken place at Lausanne, or probably it took place at Lausanne. He need not have composed all of parts 1 and 2 at the same time suggested, but it should seem that these parts took shape as indicated. About the cancellation of the opening page of part 1 could have been composed at a much earlier date. It was included in the long poem at the stage when Eliot contemplated calling this "He Do the Police in Different Voices" as he when Eliot contemplated calling this as "He Do the Police in Different Voices," as will presently be arguable that it sheds some light on the plans of working as a whole. Part 1 and 2 had the different voices title originally, or at least as soon as they reached the fair copy form. Also, about the title of the poem, there is no clue about why it was chosen. Incidentally, quite aside from the question of soundness, the notion that he redo the police in different voices was applied to the entire poem explains why manuscript displays so many degree of supposed subtitles. So the first title, "He Do the Police in Different Voices," were absolute because of the tone and the sounds available or could be traced in the poem, but there is no any clue available about why Baselands is titled to this poem. With that, I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Julna. That was a lengthier paper titled as "The Making of Wasteland," authored by Grover Smith. And the paper she has been telling us the whole story of the making of Wasteland. Sometimes the author Grover Smith might have done a very extensive research to find out the making of the poem Wasteland. Anyway, let's move on to the next presentation. That's by Riya. Riya, are you there? You may please join now and start your presentation.
Good evening to everyone. I am Riya, currently doing my second year post-graduation program in AMAL College of Advanced Studies. I would like to thank the initiators for this 100 articles on wastelands. And I will share the screen. Is it visible?
It's visible now, Riya, but it's not. Yeah, now it's visible. Yeah, visible. Carry on.
Okay. So I'm presenting the article of Philip Ficker, "The Belladonna, Eliot's Female Archetype in the Wastelands." Critics analyzing the wasteland applied the theories of Freud and Jung to a general agreement that the poem is about a sexual failure, which signifies a modern spiritual failure. This failure is customarily associated with an emasculating wound suffered by an archetypal male, the Fisher King. Eliot counterpoints the legend of castrated male with a less often recognized archetype, the sexually violated yet sterile female. The specific embodiment of this woman in Eliot's poetry is a prostitute, or merely a victimized female and promiscuous female. She is characterized by acute neurasthenia, nervous chatter, hysterical laughter, and general physical and psychological debilation. Compared to the original, cancelled version of Iliad's The Burial of the Dead indicate that Iliad had a simplified version of her. In fact, the first woman who speaks in the original version of the poem is a whore. The male narrator, considerably crude in tone and manner than the one who speaks of April and lilacs. It relates his night journey to a brothel where the procuress, Myrtil, it declares him too drunk to have a girl and gives him a bath and breakfast instead. This bath is parody of the one which the waiter receives in Dan Slay restaurants and which Phlebas the Phoenician will undergo later in the poem. For it is emblematic not of the spiritual purification that will revitalize sex, but of sterility and sexual failure. The first female speaker in the wasteland is Mary, whom the speaker recalls from his childhood in mingling of memory and desire. Presented as an antithesis to Iliad's prostitute or the primal prelapsarian ancestor of that modern female. Though Mary is not identical with the hyacinth girl who appears in the next stanza, she unquestionably anticipates her, as she stands sexually willing and eager with her hair wet and her arms full of flowers. Mary describes overcoming her fear, holding on tight and sledding down a mountain slope with her cousin. And down we went. In the mountains, there you feel free. Just as the sunlit Hove Garden suddenly expands into the anthropological hyacinth garden, the male recollection of Mary and her story becomes the faint memory of low sexual health, which resides in collective and cultural consciousness. The paradoxical memory of beauty in blindness anticipates the transformational image from Ariel's song that the speaker recalls later. Those are pearls that were his eyes. This reference foreshadows the sea change of Phlebas. The footnote at the end of the poem refers to the Hyacinth Garden passage and to Ariel's song. Taken together, the lines imply that speaker recalls both the love ecstasy and death in life blindness that followed. Mary, through her association with garden, stands as the female counterpart of healthy fisher king, representing a seasonal ritual that brought forth human and vegetative life. Later separates from religious meaning and garden, replaced by modern wasteland of the poem. Iliad's nods to the wasteland reminds us that as various male personae in the poem are subsumed in a single figure, all the women are one woman, gradually losing the Western integrated female archetype and the prostitute who has come to replace her. Thus, the lady of the burnished throne, Lil and her friend, the typist, along with Myrtle and Frisca, in original draft, unites into a single indivisible unit. Iliad's poetic label for this woman is the belladonna, an archetype he inserts into Madame Sosostris' tarot pack. Her name, well chosen, is actually a poisonous plant, an alternative to hyacinth and a fitting flower to grow in wasteland. The Lady of the Rocks appropriately inhabits a landscape of red rock and stony rubbish. Belladonna is also used as a cosmetic made from toxic leaves of the plant in order to dilate the pupils of the eyes of women. The modern mind is inclined to associate it with seduction and prostitution. Though the same woman, Iliad representation of effects is cumulative and situations and elaborate images, clears the life of modern woman, in the wasteland. The belladonna in a game of chess seems to be violated or injured, fears she might be abandoned. The man, like the Fisher King, numb after leaving garden, done to respond neither sexually nor verbally. While the wealthy lady, like Philomel, who adorns her wall, is a pathetic victim. She simultaneously asserts a temptress or sorceress who fills her chamber with intoxicating perfumes. The poem presenting two components roles in female archetype, real-life parody of Tristan and Isolde triangle or a debased Cleopatra and a tongueless Philomel. It becomes clear that each woman is a victim and a seductress. From the first belladonna in A Game of Chess to the typist, Eliot had radically simplified and consolidated his female archetype, stripped her of motive, memory, and desire until she is definable only as a single mechanical impulse. After the typist, there is but one remaining step in Eliot's reduction process, the merger of the archetypal male and female, the self-castrating Fisher King and the masturbating belladonna, in the figure of a double-sexed Tiresias. Thank you.
Okay, Ria, thank you very much. She has been reading the paper titled as The Belladonna, Eliot's Female Archetype in the Wasteland, authored by Philip Sticker. We have two more presentations remaining, and one is by HIBA and the other one by FABHANA. And first, let me invite HIBA. You may please start your presentation. HIBA. HIBA, are you there? Have you joined? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Am I visible? Am I audible?
Audible, visible, HIBA.
Okay. So, yes. Hi, everyone. I'm HIBA SHERIN of second year MA English of AMAL College. I am greatly honored to attend this melange of teachers and students celebrating the 100 years of the magnum opus of the modern epoch or era, that is the wasteland. So, I extend my warm greetings to all the faculty members and my fellow students. But I have a bit of a controversial paper today to present, and my paper is titled as Pound in the Wasteland and Eliot in the Cantos by Peter Dale Scott. So I have no PPT, but I have a small presentation. Yes. Is my screen visible?
Visible.
Yes. So we have this most charming men there. This is Eliot and our Ezra Pound, and my paper is titled as Pound in the Wasteland and Eliot in the Cantos by Peter Dale Scott. Okay. And okay. Now I'll be presenting my paper. It's a bit of a lengthy paper. First of all, let me give you a brief introduction. That is, we all know that Wasteland is the magnum opus of T.S. Eliot. It was written in the modern era. And Cantos is a poem by Ezra Pound. It's an epic, unfinished poem with a lot of fragmentary themes and more linguistic new techniques and all. So it is a big book of 120 sections, and it was also written in the modern era after the Second World War. Now, let me move on. Before that, I'll start with the quotes given by Eliot and Ezra Pound in their poems about each of them. That is, for Ezra Pound, Il Miglior Fabbro. It is the opening line of Wasteland, and it is done by Eliot. And we have a quote by Pound, that is, he was the true dentation voice, non-honored enough and deserving more than I ever gave him. That is said by Pound. Now, let me read on my paper. When Pound wrote that it is not one-man job, he no doubt had in mind the entire conspiracy of intelligence, which in his words outlashed the harsh of the political map. In his own life and work, however, one intimate collaboration redirected him as did no other, his uncomfortable seminal dialogue with T.S. Eliot. Indeed, each man helped free the other from their youthful 19th century personing. Each taught the other compression and intensification. Each helped the other refine both the architectonic and the ageless vernacular of their approaches to epic. Now, architectonic is the style having an externally defined structure, especially one that is artistically pleasing. Okay, their modernist voices of both dentation jointly arrived at. Beyond this, the very profundity of their differences enhanced an authoritative doubleness within their poetry, a doubleness which, I shall argue, Pound would develop more capaciously than Eliot. The major record of this fruitful collaboration is, of course, the recovered manuscript of The Wasteland. Here are documented examples of both Pound's brilliance as an editor and also his limitations. Eliot was right to withstand Pound's imagist onslaughts on the moments of pathos in part 1, the burial of the dead, such as the adjective forgetful in the pathetic fallacy. Winter kept his warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, lines 5 to 6. One can see what Pound is concerned with, possible vestige, and also, let me read again. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, lines 5 to 6, where Pound wished to delete forgetful. The archetypal girl in the hyacinth garden, or the equally archetypal I could not speak in. Let me read the lines. Yet when we come back late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hair wet, I could not speak. My eyes failed, I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing, looking into the heart of light, the silence. Lines 37 to 41. One can see that Pound is concerned with the possible vestiges of hyper-aesthetic Provoke persona, but the echo here is not of Provoke or Lafort, but of Dante's Boncanto in Purgatorio. Let me read again. There I lost my sight and also speech. I stopped at Mary's name, and there I fell, and only my flesh remained, from Purgatorio. The same Boncanto whose body was rolled along the banks and through the depths of the Arno, just as the Phlebas rose and fell in lines 316 of Wasteland. The succeeding words, I was neither living nor dead, are Dante in Properio persona, at the center of earth, and hell. Consistently, Eliot's strategy of dentation citation is to give us not just powerful feeling, but feeling located in a counter-traveling cosmic structure. Pound, in his opening cantos before The Wasteland, had used citations from Dante rather sportly and arbitrarily to establish location. Clearly, however, our present canto 1, where Pound's Tiresias speaks in the language of Homer or Andreas Divorce. And the Tyrese, Theban, holding his golden wand, you me spoke first a second time. Why, man of ill star? Was a model of the mythic impersonal voice of recall in The Wasteland. There I saw one I knew and stopped him crying, Stetson, you who were with me in the ships at my lay. lines 69 to 70. It appears also that this transpersonal tone was not authoritatively voiced by Eliot until after he began the task of superimposing a neoclassical mythical structure on his original poetry of Nightmare. And this was only after he had placed what he called his manuscript of sprawling chaotic poem before Pound in January 1922. We can see this voice emerging in Pound's revisions to the voices of Tiresias in part 3 of the Fire Sermon, which Ronald Bush calls the first full movement of the wasteland Eliot attempted. As an astringent breaker of pentameter who had just dispatched the Moberly in his own verse, Pound now intervenes to save Tiresias from sounding like an imitator of Gautier. He breaks the quatrains. Let me share a screen. Yeah, here we can see at the violet hour when eyes and bag in hand turn upward from the desk, the human engine waits like a taxi throbbing, waiting at its turn to spring to pleasure through the horn or ivory gates. I, Tiresias, through blind, throbbing between two lives. It is the original version, which written by Eliot, and it became edited by Pound as at the violent hour. It is given in bold letters. At the violent hour when the eyes and back turn upward from the desk, when the human engine waits like a taxi throbbing, waiting. I, Tiresias, though blind, throbbing between two lives. We can see a ample amount of editing here. So, elsewhere, Tiresias' Jamaican use of perhaps and may produce salutary explosions from Pound. Perhaps be damned, make up your mind, your Tiresias. If you know damn well, or else you don't. Perhaps and may thankfully disappeared in the final draft. Tiresias' debilitation ceased to be that of a particular period and was charged with some of Pound's timeless energy. In this way, the impersonal narrator, rescued from the constraints of a dated Priya neoclassicism, speaks as it were of for the first time after being edited. He will soon speak even more directly in Pound's Canto 11. And we sit here, I have sat here for 44,000 years. This from the Cantos. A passage we shall return to shortly. This mutually achieved transcendence of local time is the authorial hallmark not just of Eliot and Pound, but of high modernism, permitting it to express. The authoritative voicing of this opposition is one key to the doubleness. Doubleness is a term used by Eliot itself in 1924 in one of his essays. In the style of both, doubleness is defined as, in the style of both men, the feature of leaving at, of Eliot's words, of leaving at once on the plane that we know and on some other plane of reality from which we are shut out. It is also the standpoint from which Pound downplayed the parallels between Joyce's Ulysses and Homer's Odyssey as chiefly on affair or mere mechanics, since the novel does not help us discover. Eliot remains the prime author of The Wasteland, even if the poem we love was not born until Pound had cut many dead sections of the manuscripts away. But it is also possible to be original by subtraction. As Pound was here, future editions may hopefully record that Pound would have cleared away one of the poem's major blemishes, which is he, the young man, Cobuncula, arrives, a small house agent's clerk, with his one bolt's hair, one of the low on the whom a SHERIN sits, as a silk hat and a Bradford millionaire. The time is now propitious as he guesses. Wasteland, lines 231 to 35. Such insular snobism hardly befits the Tiresian voice which Pound has helped liberate. Pound's suggested emendation, drawing on other missed lines, would have located the snobism ironically in the young man rather than persona. He's a young man, Cobuncula, in the London's one cafe, and he will tell her, I have been with Nevinson today. The time is now propitious as he guesses. It is the original version. Perhaps since there is definite co-authorship for the Tyrus's voice, we will come to admit some authority to this variant reading. The pound presence I have discussed in the wasteland is the presence by subtraction. Let me repeat. The pound presence I have discussed in the wasteland is the presence by subtraction. I shall let others discuss influences such as Pound's role in introducing Eliot to occultism, Jesse Weston in Cult of Eleusis, and the Tarot Pack of Gods. My point here is that Pound brought to the wasteland a directness and energy which he had already worked out in his own poetry, chiefly Moberly, and he went away from the wasteland with Eliot's daring use of direct feeling and fragmented architectonic referentiality which would re-emerge in due course in the cantos. Now let me move on to the second phase of my paper, that is Eliot as a personal presence in the cantos. Eliot's presence in the cantos is much more pervasive and seminal matter, in which we should not be misled by the aloof references to Mr. Eliot in the concordance. The leitmotif line, these fragments you have shelved, of line 8, is not only a turning point, it also suggests the presence of Eliot's persona in the cantos as an addressee. Pound, having just wrestled with the wasteland and having studied his breakthrough, proceeded to struggle through the fragmented Malatesta cantos towards a similar escape from period persona, such as Browning's Sordello, who disappears altogether after Canto 36. Not until Pisa would Pound foreground a poetic persona confessing his own pathos, like the opening speaker in the wasteland. However, there is one earlier passage of extraordinary intimacy and tenderness in which Pound, in his rarely used personal voice, addresses his now problematic relationship to his great factive co-conspirator, Eliot. Let me share screen. Yes, we can read here. So on our turn there above him the wave pattern cut in the stone spire top a level, the well curb and the tower with cut some about that saying, I'm afraid of life after death. And after a pause, now at last I have shocked him, and another day or evening towards sundown by the arena, less gradings, a little lace at the wrist, and not very clean lace either. And I, but this beats me, I mean that do not understand it. This love of that is in them, described here as, okay, so this is the lines 29. So described here as seminal moments in two of Pound's post-war continental tours with Eliot. We know that Pound was a pro-fascist and he supported Benito Mussolini while living in Italy, and he was against American sentiments. So, described here as seminal moments in two of Pound's post-war continental tours with Eliot. The first is Exeter in mid-August in 1919, the second some months later at Verona. The intellectual disagreement that defined them was a matter of moment, both in their deteriorating friendship and perhaps even more in the emergent dialectical structure of the cantos. For in the cantos, Pound was beginning more and more clearly to oppose his own Epicurean tradition of heroes, above all Confucius and Guido Cavalcanti, against conventional thinkers such as the young Dante, Aristotle, Aquinas, and eventually the seepage of golden Buddhists who rotted in the Chinese Empire. In the light of the philosophical divergence which Pound defined as a matter of the utmost seriousness for the renewal of civilization, what surprises in these lines is the way Pound seems to question or undercut his own intellectual certainties. By giving Eliot the last word in the first encounter, now at last I have shocked him. Pound seems to voice and acknowledge one of Eliot's favorite arguments, that is atheism can be dogmatic and limited as high Anglicanism, and the reiterated confession of intellectual inadequacy in the second episode. But this beats me, I mean that I do not understand it, is for a moment is for me a moment of tender pathos and concern, as well as uncharacteristic acknowledgement of his own limitations. I cannot escape hearing an echo of Pound's exquisite translation of the Necessio in Catullus L35. I hate and love why, you may ask, but it beats me. I feel it done to me and ache. Especially in the strident context of Canto 26, where Pound has just finished slanging the female as a chaos, an octopus, a biological process. I find this self-questioning tone a breakthrough. It is unequaled in the cantos until the peasant cantos, where it re-emerges on almost the same topic. Now, Eliot, Dante, and the Candace Architectonic. Now, let me move on to the next session of my paper, which is titled as, subtitled as...
Shall I make an interruption? You may please wind up the presentation within a couple of minutes.
Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So, Eliot, Dante, and the Candos Architectonic. Elsewhere, I have tried to discuss the doubleness by which the Candos, like all great epic poetry, reenact both sides of crucial dilemmas which dichotomize us in our alienated civilization. In the wasteland, the relevant doubleness is the skepticism which is so nearly undermines the mysticism, so that the failure of knowledge in the hyacinth garden can be read both as a negative and an affirmative vestation. This ambiguity also pervades the close of the poem, as well as that of the hollow men and even the mnemonic echo of the wasteland in corresponding rose garden of Burnt Norton. Pound's doubleness in the cantos is more discursive, flagrant, and difficult to classify. One relevant example would be the shift from Artemis singing against pity in Canto 30 to Artemis, an exemplar of compassion in Canto L80, which the consequent transvolution of both the goddess and the reiterated word compassion. Pound's compassionate dialectic with Eliot in the poem is one way in which the poem blunders through its moments of healing repentance. There can be no doubt, first of all, that the moment with Eliot towards sundown by Arena is chiefly celebrated in the poem, not as a moment of disagreement, but as an epiphany, enabling the two of them to see time in a transcendent or Tiresian perspective. Let me conclude my paper. The paradisial transition is achieved in the peasant cantos, where Pound reenacts, after his belated breakdown in the disciplinary training center, the same poetic disintegration and reintegration which Eliot had worked through after his own breakdown 2 decades earlier. More specifically, the burst through from the quotidian into divine or permanent world, which Pound had planned from early as 1927, is established by a kind of architectonic citation at the close of the peasant cantos, and Eliot had used so brilliantly. At the close of the wasteland, Pound draws on the same Dantean movement to establish not only a sense of closure and mystic convergence, but also anticipation. The moment comes just before Rockdrill, or what Pound once called the third and final stage, the domination of benevolence. We think of the thrones of the Dante's paradise. So the cantos are like Dante's comedy as a true epic, a poem containing history, but the cantos might never have evolved from a Browning ragback towards a sense of order and gradations if Pound had not learned through editing The Wasteland to refine and assimilate the architectonic referentiality of Eliot's true Dantean voice. So Pound at Pisa also wrote Ugolino's Tower, but from a distance, since by an extraordinary unforeseeable coincidence he was able, or he claimed, to see it from a disciplinary training center, rejecting even the easy tragic identification he chose to offset the tragic and death dealing with the historical and constructive. So when we compare the cantos of Pound and Eliot's Wasteland, we can see Eliot more pessimistic and Pound in Canto more of a positive or more hopeful, even both of them facing chaotic situation in personal and political lives. Thank you.
Thank you, HIBA SHERIN. There was a nice presentation on that paper titled as Pound in the Wasteland and Eliot in the Cantos, authored by Peter Dale Scott. And she has been speaking on the mutual influences, how Pound influenced Wasteland, Eliot, Wasteland, and how Eliot influenced Pound back. And this is really That was a very excellent, very nice presentation. And Samad sir, we have one more presentation remaining. That's by FABHANA. And as we are running out of time, as we are a bit late, should we? I suggest to postpone that presentation to the next session, or shall we wind up that today itself, or should we postpone that to the next week's presentation? As you wish. As you wish.
Good to complete the presentation today.
Yeah. So shall I invite the next person? The very last, FABHANA. She's going to be the last presenter. Shall I invite her?
Sure. Make it faster then.
Okay. FABHANA, are you there? You please start your presentation and try to keep on, stick on to the time limit. You can take maximum 8 minutes. Within that stipulated time limit, you try to wind up your presentation, complete your presentation.
Yes, sir. Hello, everyone. I am FABHANA from AMAL College of Advanced Studies. I will give you a short analysis on the article Tradition, Heteroglossia, and T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. Am I audible?
Audible, FABHANA, please.
Yes. Actually, it's a reconsideration of T.S. Eliot's essay Tradition and Individual Talent in the light of Mikhail Bakhtin's remarks about heteroglossia. With the advent of modernism, we could see a change in attitude towards poetic composition, actually from an expression of the poet's voice to a heteroglot presentation of a variety of voices and discourses. Actually, The Wasteland can be considered as the finest example of how this new awareness affects the nature of modernist poetry. Towards the end of the 19th century, certain significant changes in English poetry anticipate a movement towards modernism. Even the shift towards a preference for the dramatic monologue in the later half of the 19th century indicates a change in direction which coincides with a kind of novelization in English literature. This suggests a general sense of renewal, but also implies that a number of features typical of the novel begin to appear in other genres too. In poetry, we find that the disappearance of the poet's voice and an appreciable distance between the poet and the speaker in the poem. Also, a new emphasis on psychology or character and the presentation of a particular perspective or perspectives. Apart from that, we also begin to find a tendency towards indirect presentation, a preoccupation with the presentness of the past, a different attitude towards time and history involving a break with an nostalgia for the past. These features are typical of Eliot's poetry and are the product of his own reaction to modernity. It strikes that a poem like The Wasteland is precisely an attempt to come to terms with a kind of awareness and overcome the absence of a necessary link with the past by imposing a sense of order and significance in the face of fragmentation. This will be made possible by considering history as a shifting locus in a space made up of multiple forms of writing. Moreover, the growing tendency in literature towards intertextuality is simply a de facto recognition that we live in a world constituted by multiple kinds of discourses that both interfere and obliterate each other. Many modernist writers suggest that there has been some kind of rupture with the past, and their work attempts to re-establish a link with it in the belief that this can overcome the sense of loss in contemporary society. So I will short my analysis on the article. So thank you so much.
Thank you, FABHANA. That was a paper on tradition, heteroglossia, and wasteland. That paper was titled as Tradition, Heteroglossia, and Wasteland. With that, we are coming to an end of all these presentations. All the 7 presenters, LIMIYA, FATHIMA, SAHLA, JAHANA, JULNA, HIBA, SHERIN, RIYA, and FABHANA. Everybody has done a very excellent job, and I would like to congratulate all the paper presenters today who have done a very excellent job. They have excellently presented the gist of the papers that they have read on wasteland. And thank you all. Thank you very much. Now the forum is open for a discussion. The participants, you are invited for making your comments, queries, or if you have to add anything on on these presentations? You may please make your comments on these presentations.
Hello. I hope
So,
I'm audible.
audible, sir. Audible, sir.
Yeah. So I appreciate all the students who have, in fact, taken the strain to read research articles one by one and eventually making notes, presentations, and eventually made their impact. And I appreciate you all. And I understand some of you have fallen in love with the text so that you can stop talking, right? Which eventually make our sessions longer. But I also, understand that the teachers have definitely taken a very important role in the selection, in the reading, in the preparation of your presentations. And I also request my colleagues at the department and as well as my counterparts at AMAL that also help our students to fine tune our presentation so that we will have more fruitful discussion. So I've been listening to all the presentations and I was a bit unsure about the kind of role that Eliot and the kind of relationship that Eliot and Pound in fact maintained. Where I think Jahana was talking about, was it Jahana who was talking about that Pound had a very, let's say, unpleasant in a sense or disturbing role in the making of the text. So if one of the presenters can talk about that, I think about the kind of relationship that was there between Pound and Eliot. I get both opinions where Jahana and Julna were talking about it and HIBA SHERIN as well mentioned it. So is there something else you want to add? Any of the presenters? That would be nice.
Yeah, the three presenters mentioned the influence of Pound, the relationship between Pound and Eliot. And if there is anything to add more, you may please.
Yes, as Eliot mentioned, Il Miglior Fabbro, the better craftsman. I think Eliot had the genius, but Pound perfected his poem Wasteland. He was better at editing and he had more craftsmanship. That is what I personally believe. I don't know if it is true or not.
Good, HIBA SHERIN. Eliot has been, he was brilliant, intelligent, but Pound has been giving the finishing touches. Right, the perfection, the element of perfection has been added by Pound. Yeah. Has anybody got any comment to make on these presentations? Emma, please come forward. Okay, so, sir, shall we wind up today's session, Sama sir?
Yeah, I think that is good. It's a bit long, right?
Yeah.
But let me just make a sentence that we will continue our online presentations in the next week as well.
Yeah.
Our schedule is on Wednesday, next Wednesday, 7:30.
Yeah. So next
and also on the next
Wednesday session is for your students, right? For PSMO college students. Yeah.
And we will have on the next week, on the second week, Wednesday, we will have another session for your students as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think I request all the teachers and the students to work together, fine-tune your presentations, try to limit it within the stipulated time, and trigger further discussion so that we will have more creative contributions. And let me all invite you to the program we organize at the department on 28th, Monday, 10 o'clock at the department where
this Monday,
Dr. Muhammad sir,
Yeah.
November 28th.
November 28th. Kunyamad sir is going to.
As a conclusion of this program, and Dr. Kunyamad from Kannur University will attend it.
Yeah.
So I invite you all in advance to the program.
Thank you, sir. As Samasar has mentioned, suggest let's try to stick on to the time limit from the next session onwards. We are going to have one more session that is, I think it's on the next second Wednesday from here. Anyway, let's wind up this session here. Now it is 9:10. I would like to thank the whole participants for their patient listening. And I would like to congratulate the paper presenters, the 7 presenters from our college, LIMIYA, FATHIMA, SAHLA, JAHANA, JULNA, HIBA, SHERIN, PRIYA, and FABHANA. I have done a very good job and nicely presented. I would like to thank the whole team from PSMO College, TIRURANGADI, the prestigious college in Malappuram district. They have come forward to participate, to collaborate, to associate with our department in AMAL College to conduct an academic program like this for marking the centenary year of the publication of Wasteland. I would like to thank immensely to that that act of collaboration that you have come forward with. I would like to thank each and every participant, especially the colleagues from my own department in AMAL College who have been very actively present. They were really very actively present, participating in this program. And also they have done a very good job in helping the students to find an apt paper, a relevant paper, and making a presentation based on that. I would like to thank all who gathered here on this platform here this night for making this program for a success, a big success. Thank you all. Good night.